Well, good afternoon, folks. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, and we're very pleased to be able to have both Stephen and Tim here to speak with us here today. I'd like to take this time to thank our title sponsor and our partnership with the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation. It's so important to the work that Tony and his group are doing is so important for the region of Waterloo, and we appreciate his sponsorship and participation in this event. Thank you once again for your attendance today and supporting the Chamber of Commerce.
I now have the pleasure of introducing to you today's speakers, Stephen Green and Tim Callen. These are two guys that are arguably on the front lines of the global war for talent, which is critically important for our companies. So let's start with Stephen. Stephen Green is one of two senior partners at Green and Spiegel, certified as a specialist in immigration law by the Law Society of Upper Canada. Stephen's been practicing immigration law for 30 years and has very extensive experience in all areas of Canadian immigration. He's been identified as a leading practitioner in immigration law and is considered a subject matter expert in the field. And I can definitely give testimony to this because he's been extremely helpful to not only me as the CEO of Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation, but a number of multinational companies looking at relocating important centers in Canada. Stephen's held numerous positions, and his expertise includes all areas of immigration law, including corporate employee transfers, federal skilled worker applications, investor applications, work permits, and the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. He also leads the investment and entrepreneur department at the firm, which assists experienced business people and high net worth individuals to invest in Canada to obtain permanent residence. Now, Tim Callen. Tim is the team leader with Agilec, which is an Employment Ontario employment services provider in Kitchener. Tim began working with Agilec in 2008 after 20 very selfless and rewarding years working with youth in conflict in the Cambridge Assessment Center. He was frequently struck by the determination, commitment, and appreciation of services that many immigrants possessed when they were seeking assistance with their job search. He heard their stories, and these resonated very strongly with him. So helping people deal with challenging life circumstances has always been a genuine passion for him. Tim is very proud of the work done by the Agilec team to help newcomers seek employment, as well as the collaborative efforts of all of the local Employment Ontario employment service providers with funding from the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development. Fueled by this passion, Tim joined the Immigration Partnership Immigrant Employee Action Group in 2012. So we're going to start with Stephen's remarks and then Tim's before the Q&A period. Please join me in warmly welcoming both Stephen and Tim.
What I plan to do today is just give you a very general overview of some of the immigration issues that I've encountered lately. There is a large PowerPoint that I can provide after that you can look at. It's far too long to look at right now. When anyone comes to us and asks us, can they get a work permit to come to Canada, one of the most important questions we always ask is dealing with admissibility. Do you have a criminal record? So it's a very important question to ask people, and I recommend that you must do that. And a lot of people that are coming from places outside of Canada think driving under the influence is not a criminal conviction, and in some states and in some countries is just a ticketed offense. But in Canada, it's a very serious offense, and you must ask that question. It doesn't mean the person is barred from coming, and there are ways to bring that person, but it's a very important question that you need to ask, and you should know that the current government is looking at making it even more difficult for people that have driving offenses with alcohol involved. Next area, business visitors. A lot of times people will come to you and say, I'm only coming up here for a day, 2 days, 3 days. I'm going to come in as a business visitor. Well, the government says that if you enter the labor market for 1 hour, you need a work permit. So be very careful. Don't think that the duration of time a person is in Canada determines whether or not they need a work permit, or they're allowed to come in as a visitor. So watch out for that. And immigration is becoming more technologically advanced, and they know how many times someone comes into the country. And they know the questions to ask now. So watch out for that. And it's probably the hardest area for us to determine is whether someone is allowed to enter as a business visitor or someone requires a work permit. So let's talk about work permits. There's lots of ways to enter Canada with respect to a work permit. The typical one that everyone seems to go to is this labor market impact analysis, and that's where ESDC, the government responsible for certifying whether or not there is a skill shortage in a particular area. It's a very technical process to go through. You have to, dot your I, and if you forget to cross your T, you have to start all over again. And the government changes its criteria quite often on their website with respect to the need to recruit and demonstrate that these skills are not available. And even from a sensible situation where this IT worker skills are not available in Canada. Everyone knows it's not available. Why do I need to recruit? Well, from the political side, they have to be able to justify that as the department that you try to recruit. And even though everybody knows there's a skill shortage in this area, and I think there's about 200,000 jobs available in the IT area across Canada, in the next 4 to 5 years, you must go through that. So just be very cautious, do it properly, because you can waste a lot of time, and it's expensive. It's $1,000 a person, so the IT. Intercompany transfer, again, multinationals, somebody that is a senior executive, manager, can transfer into Canada. The really nice thing that came out with respect to CETA is that even if you're a trainee in a company now, you don't have to be a senior executive or a manager, you can transfer yourself in through the intercompany transfer. And it's quite interesting, unlike our friends south of the border, all 3 political parties in Canada support immigration. So it's really nice when you have a really positive and view on immigration, and Canadians up to now have had that. So it's nice to deal in that type of environment. With respect to people coming in from the US, if NAFTA stays, there's a great category for professionals, and there's IT workers in there. It's a pretty high threshold to meet in the IT area with respect to the amount of work they need or their education. But again, you've got that. If you are using the North American Free Trade Agreement, you can apply for this work permit at the border. We know certain borders that are more friendlier than others, so just be careful on your selection of borders. Certain places, we have a certain airport that is in the middle of Canada, and we know someone's going to that part. We actually make them fly to Toronto and then take another plane to that part of Canada. So it's important to look at that. Another way to get a work permit is called reciprocity, where if you are working in a multinational company and you send people abroad, you can go ahead and bring someone in saying, hey, we have a mobility program. Really great program. There's a very interesting program called International Experience Canada. It's available for our Canadian kids, and I say kids now if you're like 30 and under. If you are 30 or 35 and you are from certain designated countries, you can get an open work permit or a designated closed work permit just by saying I'm under 35 and I'm from Ireland. And for example, a lot of companies that need welders go out to Ireland and recruit, because if the person's under 35, they can come in under this program. There's no recruitment available. And Australia, if you ever happen to go out to Whistler, you'll hear this interesting accent. A lot of people are from Australia because they use this program. Global skills. I was very hesitant about it at the beginning. I think it's amazing, and I think it's working really well. I'm impressed with it. The government is issuing these documents really within 10 days. It's been a very pleasant process so far that I've experienced. I think it's the real way that the work permit program should work, because it's asking the companies to step up and say, you know what, we want you to train some Canadians. We want you to talk about co-oping. Unlike this LMIA process, which I don't think is very appropriate, where a lot of times companies knows who they really want and they advertise out there and it's really a game. This Global Skills is a real program. It works well. And you know, you've got this 30-day ability to enter Canada. If you're a skilled person for a specific project for 30 days, you just show up at the border and they let you come in. Be careful, make sure you present it properly, or 15 days at a time, twice a year, you can use this Global Skills. We'll have to see how the sort of compliance part of Global Skills is going to work, because as of December the 12th, which means the program's been involved for 6 months, now they're going back to employers to see how things are going. So employers are starting to get calls. I was a little worried about that because I wasn't sure what compliance meant. But talking a little bit about compliance, understand that the previous government had indicated that 25% of all work permits issued will have a compliance on the employer. So be very careful if you're using the program, use it smartly and wisely. You as an employer are responsible for keeping all documentation for 6 months, and you are not allowed to change any terms on that work permit. I'm even talking about a raise. So if you give someone a raise above 2%, you could be in violation. If you change their duties, you can be in violation. All you have to do is ask and tell the government, and they say, no problem, thank you. But if you don't, you can be fined. They introduced this process of penalties. Some of the penalties are monetary, so you can go up to $1 million. You can be stoned. I call it the Stone Age, where they put your company on this government website saying you're bad, 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 bad. So watch out for that. So just be cautious with compliance, because it can really hurt you, and it means giving raises. If you didn't tell the government you're going to give this person a raise, you can be found to be non-compliant. So watch out for that. And I think my time is almost up, and I guess my last comment would be this express entry system. Try to put your people in this immigration system once they are here as a temporary worker. If you like them, encourage them to get immigration. Again, you know, the issue of, well, if they get immigration, that means they're not stuck working for me. And the government's response to that has always been, well, if you're a good employer, they're going to stay with you. So try to use the express entry system. And I think our record for getting someone immigration is about 19 days. So that's a far cry from some of the old days when you used to hear about 6 years or 5 years. The express entry system is working really well, but it's very technical. If you, again, give the wrong police certificate, you get refused. So watch out and read the directions very carefully.
So what is an employment resource center? It's much like in a library, a spot where folks can come in and do a self-directed job search. Employers can come in for information also. And job seekers also have the opportunity to meet with employment coaches. So that's the one hat, working for Agilec. And I'm also a member of the work steering group, Work Pillar. And a number of my colleagues from that group are here today, community members. And people that are working very hard, volunteering very hard to promote the hiring of immigrant talent in Waterloo region. I'm also wearing the hat of representing other Employment Ontario service providers. And I speak very proudly of the work that we all do within that provision, and not just with employment service delivery, but also with our literacy and basic skill colleagues as well. We are funded by the government, so all of our services are no cost. And oftentimes when someone hears that services are free or no cost, they may think they're worth that. That is not the case. Our folks work really, really hard with both employers and job seekers, and this dedication is ongoing. Our industry is certainly transforming, and it has been for a number of years. Can I see a show of hands, for one thing, to see if everyone's awake and listening to me, but also that we're here in attendance to hear Jim Estelle speak last week? Well, certainly not in attendance here at Golf's, because it was not at this location. Okay, terrific. Jim spoke about, Jim is the president of Danby in Guelph, a city in which I actually live, and he spoke about doing the right thing. And in speaking with some of you before these comments, a lot of us want to do the right thing. And it doesn't take an awful lot, frankly, to do the right thing. In terms of employers that are hiring, opening your eyes and your opportunities for immigrants is one thing. If you're not hiring but promoting the fact of hiring immigrant talent, that is also another thing. Further along, Jim had mentioned having an army of volunteers, some 600 folks that he put in place to help with his project. And you don't have to bring about an army of 600 folks to do the right thing, quite frankly. Again, that is where our Employment Ontario service provider network, as well as our community partners, come into play. And again, I couldn't be prouder of the work that they're doing. And you're probably saying, well, who are these people? Well, we can go to the various websites and find them. There's postcards that are available also to find out about these folks. We see that the labor force is changing. We all know this. It's expected. I like to throw some statistics here so I can sound almost as intelligent as Stephen. In less than 15 years, we're going to have 1 in 3 labor force participants being foreign-born. We look at, I really like a comment that I read from the chief HR officer at RBC, whose name I did not bother to document here. I apologize for that. They mentioned to win your market, you need to hire the market. And I think that speaks, that's a great phrase, I think that speaks loud and clear to all of us, that we can make a difference in that matter. About 23% of Waterloo region residents are immigrants. That's just a tick under what the national average is, of course. There are a lot of success stories that employers are sharing with us in terms of hiring immigrant talent and moving forward in that regard. Our service provision, their service providing comes into play in terms of helping link employers with these job seekers. There's a number of incentives and financial, I'll say financial incentives that are available to employers, and I can go through those if you're interested in during the Q&A part. But what's most important to us is not just matching employers with someone for a financial break, but it's doing consultative sales, and it's doing a complete needs analysis and helping employers find out what their true priority needs are and matching them up with candidates. And again, this speaks to the collaborative efforts that we have in terms of Employment Ontario service provision, that if I don't have someone that they're looking for, I'm not going to try and put a round hole filled with a square peg. We'll consult with our other providers, and we'll try and find the right person. Again, I think the best thing I can do is keep this short so that we can hear more from Stephen, quite frankly. So hopefully we're all aware of the benefits of hiring immigrant talent, but certainly we can go through that in the Q&A if you like, and I can point you in different directions. Certainly I'll be available after the formal presentation and after this concludes to speak as long as people would like. Share my card and share information about resources that you can tap into. I really appreciate you listening and look forward to having this dialogue. Thank you, Tony.
I don't get this opportunity a lot, but I just want to share one insight based on the Jim Estelle kind of talk in the region, which was really about doing the right thing. Folks might not remember that he started a company called EMJ Data Systems, and when I was running the Canadian market for digital persona, it was actually EMJ Data Systems that was my first real value-added distributor, right? And anybody who sells complex tech solutions to enterprise would understand how important those value-added distributors are, you know. And I went in to do a lunch and learn in Guelph, probably it would have been 2006, so it's about 11 years ago. And I was stunned at the diversity of his team, you know, back then. So, you know, Jim has always been a real champion for not just hiring the market, but hiring really smart people and getting things done. You know, if he had a T-shirt, it would be JDT. Just do it. Like he's a great guy. Anyway, really good opening comments. I'm going to start with Stephen. I think we should drill down on the Global Skills Program, especially because you lauded it so effusively. Others have in the region as well. I'm thinking of Stephen Lake from Thalmic Labs, who's he's got a company that's scaling to a gazillion people, very exciting technology. Maybe Stephen, just talk to the group about who's actually eligible for short-term work permit exemptions and how the kind of eligibility for the 2-week processing could work. And then maybe after you do that, can you talk a bit about options in general for the tech industry to bring foreign workers to Canada faster? Okay.
Sure. Okay, so there's 2 departments responsible for this global skills strategy. So let's talk about the Immigration Department. They changed their name now to Immigration, Refugees, Canada, Citizenship. So I'm just going to call it Immigration. So immigration states the following. If you have someone that does a skilled job and they define it through this NOC, the National Occupation Classifications, which basically means anyone that's sort of really senior manager, A's and O's. They group these people into A's and O's. And if you are an A and O person, you can come into Canada, show up at the border, and say, hi, I'm coming here for either 2 weeks or 30 days. They let you come in, you can get paid, but the person is only here as a visitor on a visitor visa with permission to work. From a corporate standpoint, please make sure when they come through, they say, I need a visitor record, because they'll need a social insurance number, and you're going to be frustrated with that if you're going to pay them while they're in Canada. So make sure they ask for that at the border, but they're coming in as visitors with permission to work. They just show up at the border if they're from countries that don't need visas, or they go to our embassies and they provide it to them. So that's the immigration side. Also, immigration said, we're going to have a concierge service. And that concierge service works the following. A organization that's designated by the federal government, and one of them is Toronto Global, the Ontario government, in their departments. And if you get referred to immigration as a company, then they will give you a concierge telephone number to call. And the concierge will help the company.
I should say that Waterloo EDC is also.
Okay, great. So Waterloo is also one, which is great. You'll call this number, and the person on the other end of the phone will say, you know, this is how you get a work permit. This is what you need. They don't expedite anything for you. It's really a high-level call center type of thing, but they're designated to your company, and they get to learn about your company, but they're not allowed to put you ahead of the line or anything like that for now. That's the way it works. They also will be able to, you know, process any work permit that you apply for in 10 days. So if you're doing an intercompany transfer and you designate you're part of the global skills, then they will process it in 10 days. And I've heard that they're meeting those requirements 80% of the time. So it's a very good program on the immigration side for that. Really opened up the ability for fast contracts. Someone's coming in, a specialist. But remember, you can't use it for more than 30 days. That's it, no more. Or twice in the year, every 6 months, you get 2 weeks. And if you're a university, you can come in for up to 120 days as a research scientist. So it really helped out a lot of the universities not going through that LMO process and so on and so forth. So immigration. The next slide is ESDC, and those are the people that issue those labor market impact analysis, the old LMO. And there's two categories in the global skills. One is called Group A and Group B. Let's talk about Group A for a minute. If you are coming to Waterloo, you're going to invest a significant amount of money, you're going to expand, you're going to do all this great stuff. You come to Waterloo and you say, hey, will you refer us to ESDC so we can be considered a Category A company? If you get referred, ESDC agrees, then ESDC will let you bring in anybody. They call them the unicorns. So the woman in charge of the program is a Mona Nandi. So I always want to get Mona for Christmas a unicorn because that's what she says it's for. So it's called the Unicorn Program. You're designated, and then they will process your labor market impact analysis within 10 days. You must do a labor market business plan, LMBP, which says, hi, I'm this new company. I plan to hire X amount of Canadians or permanent residents. I plan to do some training. I plan to reach out to underrepresented communities, so on and so forth. And they process all this within 10 days, and you can bring in anyone that is your unicorn. That's how that works. So you must be referred, though. If you're not referred, you don't get into this program. And I had a really interesting situation where it was a multinational company that head office was located in Ontario, but they were expanding out in Calgary. So I called the Ontario government, and they said, oh, no, we don't refer. We only do Ontario companies. I said, but their head office is here. Nope. So I had to call the Privy Council, office to get them referred as a category A, and I called the Privy Council office and they go, what's global skills? So you have to train people a little bit because it's only been around for 6 months. So just watch out if your company is expanding outside of Ontario, you generally have to go to the federal referral people. The next group are the Bs. And what that is, they call it category B, where you as a company state that you want to use this LMIA process for 6 or 7 IT occupations that the government has stated are in short supply and you don't have to recruit. So the advantage of using the global skills is that you don't have to advertise for a month. So you do this labor market business plan, LMBP, you fill out one of these LMIA applications, you pay $1,000 for each person you want to bring in. It's looked at generally, there's 2 departments. Ontario looks at the LMIA saying everything looks in order, and they do that in about 2 days. Then they refer it to a group in Ottawa. Then Ottawa will call you up as a company and they'll talk about this plan. How are you going to help Canada as an employer? Are you going to hire people? Do you have a training program? Are you going to work with universities, colleges, underrepresented people? And you negotiate back and forth. And remember, it's a new program, so push back. If you don't want to do something, say, sorry, I'm not doing that. They'll push you back, and you push a little, pull a little, and generally everyone gets what they want. And they sign off on this, and then you can bring in your temporary foreign worker within 10 days for Service Canada to issue that LMIA, and then immigration issues it, the work permit within 10 days. Or if you're exempt, you just show up at the border, and here you are. But remember what I talked about, that compliance issue. Once you get that work permit, you as an employer are responsible for 6 years to keep all the documents and to pay as what you said. And there's no limit to how many temporary foreign workers you can bring under this program. So if you are a company and you're expanding and you need 60 temporary foreign workers that are in the IT area, you can bring them in and you don't have to recruit. So it's a very good program, but now we're just going to see how it's going to work with it's not an actual compliance call that they're getting now, it's more a check-in. So they're checking in to say, are you following your plan? Do we need to change it? That type of stuff. But it really is working. They've issued, as of 3 weeks ago, they've issued 2,000 LMIAs under the program. So it seems to be going well. Very few of the category A, because again, that's the unicorn. So there aren't that many companies that are in the category A. So it's interesting, and I think it's working well. And one last comment before I finish global skills. The federal government and the provincial government have all made commitments to Francophone. And what do I mean? The Ontario government has stated that they want 5% of all immigrants coming to Ontario to be Francophone. The federal government has stated they want 4.9% of all Francophone entry outside of Quebec to be 4.9%. So it's like the old days when you used to hear people say when they came in the 60s, all I needed was a letter and I'm here. Well, if you find somebody that's fluent in French and you give them a letter, they get a work permit in 6 weeks. And if they're fluent in French and they have a BA for Ontario, they get immigration as well. No recruitment involved. So really try to reach out to the Francophone communities outside of Quebec. They can come really within 6 weeks. Swiss nationals, so many South African countries, Morocco, Algiers. If you can find someone that you need and they have the skills, it's just a letter. It's amazing. I'll be quiet.
All right, good stuff, good stuff. Yeah, a lot of potential with Francophone Africa, no doubt. Tim, let's get a little more granular here.
Sure.
You've been at this for a while. Can you elaborate on 1 or 2 notable success stories so folks can get a better sense of what things drive success?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think from the perspective of there's a lot of specific examples that we could look at, but let me kind of pick up on what Jim spoke about last week then too, and what works and what doesn't work, and to hear him speak and speak so passionately rather about workplace culture and just the positive impact that bringing in immigrant talent had on his workplace culture and the impact that it had on the community of Guelph, also in Wellington County and Waterloo region, certainly. So in terms of finding successes, having open dialogue with current employees about any concerns that might come about, and we do this ourselves too when we speak with employers of all stripes in terms of matching up our candidates for employment with what their needs are. not everyone is always comfortable with asking uncomfortable questions, as it were. So we're very open to hearing that and to act in that manner too, in terms of service providers. To questions about how is this person going to fit in, and how is this person going to communicate with others? What about conflict resolution in the workplace? So we can have that dialogue, and again, I can direct to websites and to hireimmigrants.ca, our Waterloo immigration website also for more specifics. But again, looking at the benefits of bringing in global talent that can share those experiences that they have in their home country and home regions in terms of augmenting what we do here locally. There's also successes that Jim spoke about in terms of workplace communication. So it's not always just English language training, but also workplace communication. And endeavors that can help that, and certainly as service providers linking with our literacy and basic skills friends, we can talk about how we can assist with driving that in workplaces as well as outside of workplaces. Because that's the biggest concern, one of the biggest concerns that employers raise certainly is that workplace communication, and how am I going to train someone if their language isn't up to par for that setting. I think I'll leave it at that then.
Okay, back to Stephen. We had an interesting conversation over lunch where the dynamic of being a welcoming host country came up. Obviously, over the last 18 months or so, and actually the first official year of the Trump presidency, immigration in general has been a hot topic. I know that multinationals that are based in Europe and also Asian multinationals have been hearing from their key employees about sort of where they want to live and work. Have you seen a tangible Trump effect? And maybe can you talk a bit about how investment promoters like myself can tastefully make that part of the pitch when we're talking to multinationals? Okay?
Sure. Trump has been a great thing for us, meaning Green and Spiegel. He's made Green and Spiegel greater again, so I wear a little hat now. What we've seen is the following. Many of the highly skilled IT workers, anyone that's highly skilled in the United States under an H-1, which is their kind of like LMIA program, where you're a skilled worker, get paid a certain amount of money, they're very concerned about their future. They don't know if they're going to have their visa extended. They don't know if they're going to be able to be sponsored for a green card. And they have gone to their employer and say, you know what? I know I do a skill that's needed anywhere in the world. I can go to Australia, I can go to Canada, I can go anywhere. We're not very welcome here anymore. And the employers became very concerned about this. And they're saying, wow, if we're going to lose all these skilled workers, and we know there's a huge skill shortage in the IT area, we won't be able to provide services to their own clients. So what are we going to do? So a lot of them have looked at us. And I can tell you one company that did that, and they have some very large service centers in the United States, and they determined a couple months ago that Ontario would be the place to come because of either the global skills program they were using, because they were IT workers and they fall on that list, or that the company would set up a new branch in Canada and they were eligible to transfer their workers. Once the worker comes here, based on their background, some of them can apply for immigration immediately, or they may have to be here for 1 year working, and then they're eligible to apply for the program. Ontario has a PNP program as well, which has gotten much better. They hit their targets of 5,000 as of about 2 weeks ago, but not all the other provinces hit their numbers, so Ontario even got more, so it's reopened again. Yeah, the provincial nominee program. So companies are coming here saying, wow, there's a pathway for our employees. We're kind of close neighbors. Why not set up centers here? Why not do the work here? And also, if I was looking for workers, I would go down to these areas where there are a lot of IT workers saying, hey, we have a pathway for immigration in Canada. Honestly, if you speak English well, you have a good education, you're young, and if you work for 1 year in Canada, you can get immigration. It's an amazing program. So a lot of people are taking advantage of it, and it's so fast. You know, once you apply and you have that general criteria, the government is processing 80% of the cases in 6 months, which is amazing. And then people, you know, they get their lives and their family. They see our way of life is very different, and thank God. I mean, I'm a big fan of multiculturalism. I think we've got a great multicultural, you know, policy here where, you know, you don't come up here. I'll step back. In America, when you go to America, you go into this great pot and mix you up, and out comes an American. We don't believe in that. You come to Canada, you teach us your culture, we learn from you, we learn from each other, and that's what makes us such a great country. You know, I'm so happy when I can say, you know, if I go to Toronto and I go to, you know, we have Chinatown, we have 5 Chinatowns, we have signs that are written in Portuguese and Italian. It's an amazing place. And, you know, there was a company that came up here, had their national convention here about 3 years ago, Microsoft. They had 14,500 people come up to Toronto. And then they had a debriefing after. And what was the greatest thing that everyone liked? Was the food and the culture. Because the year before was in Houston, and all people could eat was steak. But, you know, they had a variety, and we had people. And you think also from a business standpoint, too, when you're doing, and, you know, I think we're a little naive in Canada, and we don't reach out enough. You know, we're being forced to now to reach to places like China and all over the world to do business. We have such a resource of culture here that can teach us how, from a cultural standpoint, to do business with people. You know, when you go out with, you know, individuals that are born in China, you know, there's a whole discussion about where to sit at the table, don't finish your food, how to give out your business card, don't give these gifts, or any other part of it. And we have these experts that have immigrated here that can teach us and really expand our ability around the world. Just don't look to the United States, look everywhere.
Yeah, very insightful comments. I think sometimes as Canadians we're a little too Boy Scoutish, if I could say that. We did an event in March with Communitech in San Jose. We're at the SAP Center for a Leafs-Sharks game, and we had about 100 people that we identified in the tech sector and did the Come to Canada pitch. It was 3 months before the Global Skills Program got launched. We were talking about it. And interestingly, it was federal officials who were saying, no, you shouldn't do that, tone it down, you're going to be accused of poaching. But I think I'm with Stephen. We really have to aggressively, you know, put our stakes in the ground in this global war for talent. You know, I think given where we're at with time, I'll open it up to 1 or 2 audience questions, and then we'll wind it up. And any questions?
This is something.
Yeah.
This is something for Stephen and Tim. The global skills strategy that was implemented within the summer, I think it's, as you mentioned, it's a great program. However, you know, our Waterloo region is strong in the high-tech industry, but also we're seeing skills shortages within the trades.
For sure.
And many businesses have come up to me, and, you know, I can't find welders. I can't find, you know, concrete laborers. I can't find concrete finishers, et cetera, et cetera. This goes on and on. Is there something that you would recommend for this? Because we've seen a lot of construction within the region, LRT, et cetera. Our region is growing very fast, but I think that skilled labor is still a shortage.
Sure. Let me wisely pass the microphone to Stephen to get his thoughts in terms of acquisition of global talent for this, because certainly we see this with the employers that we have contact with all the time, and it's a huge concern. Absolutely.
Okay, so there's 2 things I would recommend. The Ontario government 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago made this great announcement that they signed an agreement between the federal government and themselves to facilitate certain aspects of immigration. One of the aspects is that they're allowed to give a global talent list, that's the Ontario government, to the federal government saying, hi, process these applications in 10 days for LMIAs. So you should be speaking to your Ontario colleagues and say, hey, we've been told there's a real shortage of welders. They don't want to go ahead and wait, you know, 3-4 months if they found someone. So that's one thing. You should lobby the Ontario government to get those type of skills on that list. If they're not on that list, then you're stuck with this LMIA process where they must recruit and use that to bring the foreign workers. I know that the federal government in the past has gone to Ireland, for example, to get a lot of trades, to Europe to try to bring the trades here. And I'd mentioned this International Experience Canada, where you just put your name in, you find a welder, the welder fills out an online application, and the government has sort of a lottery system where they pull them out. You don't have to do an LMIA, you don't have to pay the $1,000, so you could use that. But again, I understand also that the federal government is looking at trying to create a program for trades. It's always been a hard part of the program because generally trades, their education is their skills. So we can't use the point system so well. Generally, their language isn't great. So with this, the points are really hard. And to the government's credit, they've used the express entry system to specifically go to trades where normally in the points you need about 440 points. They said twice that you only need 180 points, but it could only be a skilled trade. So it's, I think the feds are always looking for ideas to make it better, the program. You know, many, many years ago, we had a Portuguese program for a lot of Portuguese nationals that came here. So I would, you know, meet with your colleagues in the federal government and say, hey, look, everyone knows there's a skill shortage, but then understand their side too. They're always saying, well, what happens when the economy turns around? What are these people going to do? And that was the issue that they had in Alberta, for example, where the federal government permitted this low skill program where they brought in about 2,500 coffee pourers that were getting $25 an hour. Then the economy kind of went a little under in Alberta, and now they had these 2,500 workers that all they really knew was pour coffee. So, you know, so remember both sides of the argument here that you have to look at. But I really think the government's open, and they'll listen to anything that will help you.
Ian.
Just, I guess one of the questions, Tim is on our immigration partnership working steering group, and which I chair, and the notion is how do we get small and medium-sized business in particular? Because that what we've been talking about here is if you're a larger business and have some resources, it can be easier to navigate the system. And maybe from both your perspective, from a sort of a service provider, but also Stephen, what would your suggestion be, or how can small business navigate? What are the things that they should be doing to make sure when they have needs that they can utilize the programs that exist? And then from a service provider perspective, what are the things that you're doing to try and make it as easy as possible? Because I think that's one of the real risks is there's not enough big businesses to fill the jobs that are available because many of them are in small and medium-sized business.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, certainly bulk of our work is with small and medium-sized businesses. And, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And that's something I'm certainly very familiar with, but it's so very true. So it's promoting the word to employers, those employers that we're here to help, and that we have folks that are candidates for employment that we meet with regularly that can fill the gaps that they have. In terms of immigrant talent, it's educating employers, much like I said in the previous comment about open dialogue in terms of what are the concerns that employers have and how can we help alleviate those. And we've had great success with that. Certainly from a global perspective, Steve, go right ahead.
I mean, you know, SMEs can use all these programs. They're just looking at, can you afford the welder? So if you have enough money to pay that welder, which can either be demonstrated if you're a new company from a letter from an accountant saying, hi, they've seen your, you know, what your projections are, so on, that's good enough. Or you do show them your financial statement saying, I've got enough money to pay, then you can use these LMIA programs. I mean, the IEC, the working holidays, they don't even look at the company because the person gets an open work permit. They can come here. So it's really to sort of, for you as an employer, as an SME, you have to find your pathway to reach out to the people that have these skills. But there are programs that are pretty, you know, favorable to you that you can use in Canada. Don't think it's just for the big people. It's not. They're SMEs, and the government understands that SMEs really are the driving force in this country.